All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Tulsa Time here with Dan and Adam. We are here after watching episode 2, Center of the Universe of Tulsa King. Dan, how's your Sunday going?
It's going fine. I like that title, Center of the Universe, by the way,
Usually, that's what I title my bedroom, the center of the universe.
because you're all alone and everything.
Yes,
Tell
Dan,
me I'm wrong.
because
Tell me
I'm
I'm wrong.
all by myself. You're right. Okay, so we're going to jump in right away with how things went in the episode. Dan, feel free to stop me if you have any ideas, but we'll probably go scene by scene. Some
Yeah.
scenes were absolutely pointless with no reason for them to actually be on the show,
Ooh,
and yet they were
that sounds
there.
spicy.
So the episode starts off with Dwight. He's at the Mayo Hotel. He's searching the internet for records on his daughter Christina, who he calls Tina, and he can't find out anymore because it's asking for a credit card, and Dwight has no credit card. Hey, Dan, we've been there, right? Where you like try to find somebody's number online and then it asks for a credit card. You're like, never mind. I don't really want to know.
Can't say I've been there too many times myself, but when I was in high school, I remember my band director saying, like, anybody can find out stuff on the internet these days. And he went on this whole tirade. And so I decided to go look up all the information on him, including like his house floor plan. And there's just like amazing stuff you can get from the city. And then I slid it in a manila envelope under his door and really creeped him out. I probably shouldn't be saying this, but that's what that made me think of. So there you go.
Wait. Can we just wait? Okay. Why did they have a floor plan of his house?
Because they do for some like,
You got it online or you went to like
yeah.
City Hall and you're like, I would like a floor plan?
No. I got it online. And granted, this was back in the early 2000s. So it's not like there was quite the same web infrastructure as today. But yeah, they had that kind of stuff, everything with property taxes associated with it.
And then did you have like an X on the map, like where he slept? Be like, I know you're here.
No, not to that level of detail. That would be really creepy.
Yeah, you just
I
use
mean, the whole thing was
stickers.
creepy anyways. All I wanted to do was prove a point that there was lots of information available.
That you probably did. Absolutely. So then he is shown mailing money, I assume, to the mafia back in New York. He goes to pay for it with cash. They don't take cash, so he gets upset, but asks the customer behind him, hey, if I give you money, will you pay on your credit card? And so then the guy agrees, and
Elite
Dwight is,
Italian effect.
yeah, it's going to change frequently. And then the guy helps Dwight, and Dwight's like, great, now I don't have to punch this guy out. It's fantastic.
So I thought it was interesting in the previous episode. It was like, oh, I don't have a cell phone. You kids and your cell phones these days, right?
And now he
And
can
then
use a cell phone?
and then he proceeded to pay the woman at the hotel for her to book an Uber,
Uber,
Lyft,
yeah.
or whatever it was for him, right?
Yep.
So he went from this thing is dumb to I'm going to pay someone for it to then finally giving in and doing it. That was the model last episode. And I thought it was interesting because it was the same exact thing this time. It's like, this is so dumb. Why don't people take cash? To then like paying someone for use of their card. And then eventually we'll see that he gets his own debit card. But I was like, it kind of followed the same formula. So, given how angry he was at gender pronouns tonight, maybe he'll pay someone for use of theirs and then he'll switch gender pronouns next episode.
No, he has a pronoun, Dan. He said it.
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 He is it. Yes.
Yes. So here's our first absolutely meaningless scene. Dwight is getting coffee. Then it just shows him like getting coffee, and then he asks for glass. And that was the end of the scene.
I actually did think of something, which is it was weird that he was the one asking for a cup. Because if you say, like, if you're following like the hipster kind of thing to do, I feel like all the coffee shops around me have glasses or ceramic stuff, like because of the environmental impact. Like, I don't know any coffee shops that just use paper cups aside from like a Starbucks kind of thing. Like, if you go to a coffee shop, so I felt like it kind of flipped. Like, he was like, what? You guys use paper cups? But I feel like that would have been thing a longer time ago. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't remember what coffee shops were like back in 1998, probably because I wasn't drinking coffee.
In our pre-caffeine days. Yep.
That's right. I got all my caffeine the normal way through cocaine and heroin. Okay, so Dan,
Yeah.
switching scenes. The FBI lady is talking to her friend, an FBI
Who
lady.
who's actually, we find out she's ATF, not FBI,
Oh,
just to
that's right,
clarify.
ATF. But doesn't she wear an FBI jacket?
Well, I can't remember. I remember that they had the FBI briefing them in that one scene in the last one, but it sounds like
Okay,
the FBI is putting out the brief and she works for the ATF. So
okay.
small point there.
So her friend tells her that she's asking about Dwight, and her friend kind of picks up, "You aren't asking about this unless you're actually like interested in this person.
Mhm.
So what's the deal?" And then she's like, "No, no, he just bought me a drink." Yeah, which is true. Bought her a drink. That was
Well,
part of
that's
it.
fair.
And then
I didn't just get a drink though.
she kind of okay, then she builds up Dwight to her friend saying, like, they tried to flip him 6 times and he never ratted anyone out, so and we find out that one of the Dwight has killed 2 people, one of them was in prison in self-defense, the other one seems to have been a job, but I just found this interesting. I don't know, at first, after she slept with him and she found out how old he was, I was like, "Well, that's the end of that story," and, like
Oh,
but,
no
she
way. I
may
didn't think
like
so
him.
at all. I thought it would turn into this whole like, oh, he's a bad boy, but I can't help myself. I saw that coming a mile away.
Yeah, but I thought the age thing would ruin it.
Not with Sylvester Stallone. You know that he's going to be in a show and he has to be in some romantic love interest. And so you pick like an attractive, not super young, so it's not like as creepy, like this 45-year-old attractive. I think they set this up from the get-go.
Well, obviously, Dan, because it's scripted, okay?
I know, but I'm just saying, like going into this show, you'd have to know that Sylvester Stallone's going to have a love interest, and they're not going to make her a 75, 76-year-old woman. Therefore, when they set this up, I'm like, oh, now we all see who that's going to be.
It probably is as young as they could make her without it being, like, way too.
Right? They're not going to have a 25-year-old woman. That would be.
He definitely tried. He
I,
definitely
I
tried.
mean, sure.
So, yeah, and, she was trying to say now when they say somebody flipped they tried to flip him 6 times, what do you think that means?
My guess is that's like the government tried to flip him
Yeah, but
that
what does
many
flipping
times,
entail?
trying to get intel to take down someone bigger, like getting him to talk. Hey, we'll minimize your sentence, or we'll get you out, or we'll do some favor for you if you talk on about this other individual higher up in the mafia.
Well,
That's what I'm thinking. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I was just looking up flipping somebody, and that is something totally other than that for the internet. I just get flipping off. But does that mean like they like put a guy in his cell, like that's his roommate, but his roommate's like works for the FBI or something like that? What is flipping? Or they just had him in a room and like one guy had like a glass cup of coffee and Dwight had a paper cup and they like tried to get him to flip to get that glass cup.
I mean, you have a wild imagination, so I'm sure it could be whatever you want, and I bet they'll never get into the details. But no, I would guess it would be like they're building a legal case in some other crime, and they want to build. I don't know. Haven't you watched plenty of law shows? It's like they want to build on this, so they go to someone who's already in government custody, in this case, Dwight, and they're like, "Hey, can you give us information on this?" And give him some kind of incentive to do so. And he kept refusing. Therefore, he had to live out his full 25-year sentence.
I guess, it's over 25 years, so maybe at that time I'm sure they're different people trying to flip him. It's not the same person who's like, "Well, I'll try this again like 6 times."
Oh, and you never know. People's motivations change. Like, even as we get deeper into the story with his daughter, Tina, like how you perceive the outside world and your family and what you want to be doing change, I'm sure, depending how deep into your sentence you are as well.
Right. Dan, anything else about that scene? Or are you ready to move on to the next one?
No, I just thought it was a little bit like sorority girl giggling about like this cute boy I met kind of thing, but he's a bad boy, criminal, Sylvester Stallone.
You don't? Whenever you hear of guards that mess around with the inmates, I mean, I'm sure that there's like, because there's more guys in prison, but you always hear of a female guard with a male inmate. You don't usually hear of the female inmate and the male guard. Is that
I'll be real
stereotyping?
honest that I like haven't heard many of these stories, so I'm sure that is of great interest to you. But
Well,
in the center of your universe,
it pops up on my notifications.
yeah.
So glad you gave us the intro to Center of the Universe. Then Dwight is shown walking by a homeless woman, and she tells him that there's the center of the universe where no one can hear you. So he walks into the center of it. A really random white horse just comes around the corner, as they do in Oklahoma, downtown Oklahoma. And then he calls to the horse. The horse makes no reaction. I don't know what he was expecting. Like, if he calls the horse and the horse is like, like, oh, it heard me. This isn't, it doesn't work. So then he walks out, and he calls the homeless lady, and she goes, I can hear you. And then he offers her money, and she refuses to take his scuzzy money. Now,
Okay, so at the beginning of the scene, did you think she was messing with him? Because I thought she was messing with him, and then he'd like say like, "Oh, I committed this crime."
wait,
Yeah,
you were joking? Yeah. Well, I really wish they wouldn't have done this. Like, I get at the end of the episode why they've shaped it like this, but they lied about it. Did some research on this center of the universe. Yes, it is called that, but it's just an echo circle, Dan. That's all it is.
so I also looked this up because I found it interesting. But I mean, it seems like it really does have some kind of layer of auditory protection around it, where it's like you might hear something, but it's hard to decipher what's being said on the inside.
I've checked, but if you look at it, it's the same as it was in college, where it was just like the short things that go around it. And if you're like, why am I getting an echo from like a foot tall cement all the way around? Yeah.
Okay. I think we might have to road trip there or interview someone who's done it before. Sounds pretty cool. But yeah, we did have what we called the Echo Circle in college. And that was fun because we do a cappella group stuff and sing and whatever else. But you could definitely hear it outside.
Yeah.
I think it's two different things because no one wrote about our Echo Circle anywhere. I tried searching for that afterwards to see if anybody had, but not a big thing. This, though, is on like lists of national things to go visit. So I don't think they're totally BSing it. They said over 10,000 people visited a year.
Dan, you really think you can go in the middle of that and nobody can hear you?
I'm not saying like not at all, but I'm saying it would obscure the sound. Because if not, there'd be 10,000 ticked off people a year, and you'd find all this stuff about people who are like, this is stupid.
It may be the greatest scam in Oklahoma.
In Oklahoma, and now people will flock to it even more because of this show.
That would be now for the college we went to. If you're a student watching the show, I mean, I don't know why you do that, but if you were, that is the perfect gag gift that you like tell a freshman that nobody can hear you if you're in the center of it.
There you
You
go.
try to get them to talk and be like, go ahead, tell your deepest, darkest secret. We can't hear you.
I mean, the way they set it up, well, and I guess we can talk about it at the end, but it really seemed like it's setting up like a confessional. Like a lot of mafia shows, they have strong Catholic faith, and so they'll oftentimes go confess to their priest. To me, this seems like analogous to that. Dwight doesn't have anybody, so who's he going to tell his deepest, darkest secrets to? He's just going to acknowledge them publicly, but in a way that he can't get in trouble for.
Bum, bum, bum. Foreshadowing.
Yeah.
So next scene, an FBI lady, Stacy Beal is her name. She
ATL.
happens to be in a shrink's office. She basically talks to him about her ex, and if her ex is seeing anybody, then he says, are you seeing anybody? And she says, no, I'm not seeing anybody. And the guy's like, but you've slept with somebody? I don't know. That's pretty presumptuous of him. But then she's like, yeah, I did, but I don't plan on sleeping with him again. And he's like, or because he's a felon or something like that. And he's like, good, noted. All right. And that's the end of that discussion. Anything surprise you about that scene, Dan?
I mean, it seemed like pretty classic talk to a psych kind of, I don't know. No big surprises there. The only thing I thought was funny was that, yeah, have you slept with anyone lately sounded a bit forward. And then when she's like an older guy, I thought he was going to like get super excited about that because he was kind of a nothing special about him, older dude in the room.
So I would love, and in fact, I'd love to pay a therapist that like gave you their honest opinion unfiltered when they would hear stuff like that. Like, so you're in their office and you're like, yeah, I slept somebody, and they're like, you tramp. And they'll be like, wait, what? Wait, what? I think that'd be so funny.
I'm sure you could pay someone for that. They
Oh,
probably wouldn't be called a therapist.
yeah, yes. Okay, you could probably hire a prostitute actually to do that. I feel like I'm gonna tell you things, then you say bad things back to me. All right. Anyways,
Adam,
so
you're exposing so much about your true self on this show. I mean, me too. I'm the one who's creepily looking at people's homes and sharing that information with them. So
she's like, "Oh, that's really kinky. What are you looking for?" And you're like, "Got any mean comebacks for me?" Like, okay. So the
all
next
right.
scene shows that the guy in the first episode that Dwight punched, he's talking to the Italian mob family, which seems to be in a laundromat, because I'm assuming that's where they laundry money and their boxer briefs. And he wants Dwight killed for punching him because he's a made man. He shouldn't be able to punch him.
Which I thought is super weird when he's like, "I'm a made man." It's like, well, so is Dwight. Like all those guys are made men. So that seemed like a really weird point to me to bring up. Like you can say, "Hey, I'm ticked," and maybe I'm higher in rank than him or something, but it just seemed weird. I mean, they always talk about being a made man if you're like an outsider and you come in and you do something stupid against a made man. It just, I don't know. My perception was like, you want to kill a guy for throwing a punch after he's been in prison for 25 years and you're both made men? That seems over the top to me. I can see how he's ticked though.
So there's a guy on YouTube, and I'm gonna get his name wrong. His name is Michael Francesca or Francesco or something like that. And he is an Italian mobster. And so what he does is he reviews different things and tells how close it was to what he went through.
Uh-huh.
And I saw this before I saw this episode, so I'm glad that this is the direction it turned, because when he was talking about what actually was things that would happen, he said that would never happen because as soon as he punched him, they'd have killed him, like right there. And I was like, he,
Even though they're at the same level.
right. Yep. There's code. You just don't do it. Otherwise, bam.
Hmm.
And I thought,
There you
okay,
go.
well, that's interesting. So I am glad they like brought this up so it's more
Sure.
authentic. And then, he did mention stuff that you had talked about like, going to a new place and then starting up an operation like your first day. And he's like, that had never happened. So, Dan, you have the mind of a mobster. Anyways,
Welcome to the family.
so he basically says he wants Dwight killed. And the guy says, you can't do that. He's my dad's friend. And he's like, but there's a code. You can't do this. We have rules. And so then Dwight's nephew was going to talk to his father and see if they can kill him or whatever. And that was the end of that scene. Any thoughts on that, Dan?
I mean, like, I can't tell if Chicky is supposed to have any real power himself or if he's just like a go between. Because like at the beginning, it seems like he's supposed to be the guy, he's telling him to go to Tulsa and all this kind of stuff. But then in this scene, it's like, oh, well, I better check with my dad, better check with my dad. I don't know. I'm just kind of curious if we'll see him like become the center of a power struggle or anything like that, or if he's just supposed to be a secondary character. I don't, knowing the actor, I think he's going to take a more primary role. So far, it just seems like he's an in between kind of guy.
So, Dan, I think that eventually we see that he uses his dad as like, he's not the go between for his dad. He uses his dad as a go between. So he only exposes his dad what he wants him to be exposed to, and tells him what he wants to. Otherwise, he makes decisions and says, "It's my dad that says
Right. So
this."
kind of like if you're at a party and your parents are like, "You can blame stuff on me," and you're like, "Well,
They
my
sold
parents said
me the
all right,
heroin.
gotta get out
Yeah.
of here."
Right. Right.
Yeah. You and these drug references, laying it on thick.
I can make the references because I have no idea how they work. Like if somebody is like, "You want to do meth?" I'd be like, "All right. So how do you do meth?" Like I don't know. Do you smoke it? You shoot it? I have no idea. They'd be like, "This is a bad idea. This is a very bad idea." Okay, so Dwight has Tyson take him to the marijuana shop. It shows Bodie getting high. He's talking about a milkshake flavor of marijuana that really slaps. And I have no idea what that means, but I cracked up at him saying it. Dan, did you find that funny?
Uh, like you're saying you've never heard the expression "it slaps"? Is that what made you laugh? Or that there's
Dan, did
different
you find that
flavors?
funny? Ah.
I'm trying to figure out what part was funny to you. The expression "it slaps"?
Yeah, I've never heard. He's like, yeah,
Oh,
it really
no,
slaps.
kids these days say "it slaps" all the time.
Well, back when I was at my former job, kids would say that claps. They'd say claps, and so I like started to adopt their vernacular, and then they're like, "You probably shouldn't say that because that actually means like clapping and sex." And I was like, "Whoa, you guys,
Yep.
you're sick." Okay, um, is that what slaps means?
I don't know where it originates from.
There's so many places we could go with this. I'm gonna
Yeah,
move on to
let's
the
just
next
leave
scene.
it. I didn't find it particularly funny because I've heard that expression several times.
Okay. All right. So Dwight tells him that he needs to talk to his supplier. Tells Bodie that so that he can get a better deal for him. And there's a business opportunity coming for Bodie, and Bodie needs to be ready for it. But Dwight does not give a timeline for it. Then it shows Dwight at the bank, and because his license is expired back in '98, he cannot have identification to get a debit card. So Tyson will take him to the DMV to get a license. Dan?
Okay, but before that, what I thought was crazy was that they're talking about like getting a credit card, and then Tyson proceeds to define, oh, there's this other card, a debit card that you can get from a bank. Okay, debit cards have been around for longer than Dwight was
1990.
in prison.
Yep.
Yeah, so that one I was like, really? I mean, they're just, I don't know, between the kids these days stuff and then the let me explain this to you so you understand. It just, that's pouring it on a little bit much for me.
I get it. Okay. So then there's a guy at the equestrian center that is shown taking bets, and he is called and told that Dwight is in Tulsa and he's probably staying at the nicest hotel.
And
And
that's the guy from last episode. This is Armand, who now they referenced him as Manny, which I would guess is just a shortened name or nickname for that same guy.
oh, so his name is Manny.
Yeah, but like on IMDb and they're referencing him as Armand.
Okay. So then Dwight is shown at the DMV, cheats on his test, shame, and then gets his picture taken. And what was the funniest part about this whole scene is when he gets the picture taken, and then after they snap that picture, he turns to the side. And it's funny because they're like, "What are you doing?" And that's something you, I guess, do in jail. You know, you do your profile pics, and that I found that.
Mug shots.
Yeah, whatever.
Profile
Did
pics.
you laugh at that or no?
I'm sorry to say, I'm going to sound like the driest person.
Uh,
I will tell you, I'll tell you when the one moment comes, the one time that I did laugh, which is not until later. I didn't laugh at this because I'm like, you took your mugshots when you entered into prison 25 years ago. So your default instinct is going to not be like taking pictures like that. So I did not laugh, but I could see how it was funny. I'm sorry. I'm not the funny guy of the show.
I do think, Dan, we should sell coffee cups with mug shots on them. Get it? Mug shots. Mug shots.
Well, you could do like a double joke because the shots could be like coffee or alcohol shots.
Dan, we found our new business.
Something.
So then he then is able to get his driving permit, and his test is moved up by bribing the lady who it's not like they have cameras there watching them or anything. So Dwight could use this driving permit as an ID to get his debit card. And so then they go to the banker. He gives them the debit card. The banker thinks that they might be Dwight and Tyson might be gay lovers, but Dwight said that they were colleagues. And this was all brought up because the banker mentioned that, maybe Tyson might need access to the account and have another debit card. So what did you think about that scene, Dan?
I mean, the
Was it
whole
a
like,
swing and a miss at trying to be like to figure out the times?
well, the part that stuck more out to me was, trying to paint Tulsa as like backwoods stuff, both by that, but also when he's like, oh, New York. I went to New York once. Like, I mean, I don't know anyone who talks like that. And we live in North Dakota and Montana. So I don't know. It always seems like, oh, the fancy people from New York. Wow, that's so great.
That would have been a perfect opportunity for that one salsa commercial where they're like, New York City. You remember that commercial, Dan?
I
Like
don't.
El Paso salsa. Okay, good joke. Okay, so then Chicky, is that his name? Chicky calls Dwight as they're leaving, and as Dwight's coming out of the bank. Chicky says it will cost Dwight $100,000 to make this other guy, the guy that Dwight punched, make him feel better. And Dwight was furious and suggested he might just send a bomb to this guy. So what was interesting is that this is where I kind of got the idea that maybe he didn't talk to his dad. Maybe he just
Yeah.
because they didn't show him there, but it like insinuated that this is what my dad wants. And I thought this would be a perfect thing where you wouldn't talk to your dad. You just say this is what he wanted.
I got a similar vibe because I was like, well, what would define 100K given that Vince never talked money or anything like that? So, unless it's just some like, oh, yeah, the fee for punching another dude's 100K and everybody knows that, it sounded kind of made up. And so, yeah, I got a vibe. I guess I wasn't so focused on cutting the dad out. I was just thinking like, oh, maybe he's just extorting him for cash. Because I think the big struggle for power we're going to see is between Chicky and Dwight. I
Yeah.
think that's going to be the overarching theme later in the season, or maybe get set up for a second season. Of course, we've seen all these reports this week about Sylvester Stallone not being so sure if he can do it for another season and all that kind of stuff. But I know all that's very clickbaity, so I'm not sure how much truth there is to it. But I would say that's going to be the larger power struggle. I think there's going to be some kind of struggle with this Manny and whoever Manny works for. It seems like there's another organization, but I think once that's taken care of, then it's going to be more this internal power struggle.
I'm sure there's a broker's fee, Dan, where they like give him 50,000 and keep 50,000. That make total sense.
Well, maybe, but I could see Chicky coming back and being like, "No, my dad said keep the peace, whatever," and then pocketing the cash himself.
Right. All right.
Either way, he's going to get a cut.
So the next scene is where I first started to see great acting in the show. And that is where at Dwight's hotel, he gets visited by Miss Stacy Beale. She confesses that she is an ATF agent and wants to know why he's there in Tulsa, and then brings up his daughter. And that's where you can tell Stallone's whole body change, like after his daughter's
Hmm.
brought up. And I was like, that's the first great acting I've seen in this show. I'm sure there'll be more, but that was the first moment. He mentions he hasn't seen his daughter, Tina, for 18 years because it was too hard on her to see him like that. So he said to her, do not visit. Stacy mentions if Dwight gets into trouble, she cannot bail him out, and he did not expect that. What do you think of that scene, Dan?
So I mean, I agree with you. I think we saw some good raw emotion in regards to his daughter. I thought the line that you just mentioned about like, well, if you get into it, I can't bail you out. That was weird to me because that's something that you would say if you had known someone for a while and that they were in this position to be able to help you out. Like, let's say they were aware of each other and had this on and off relationship. And then you're getting into something and you're like, hey, can you help me out? But up until the moment she walked through the door, he had no idea that she was part of the ATF. So it seemed a bit premature to have that kind of a like, hey, I can't do anything for you, just because it seemed like there's no depth to their relationship yet. I think absolutely there's going to be depth there because she won't be able to help herself and they'll probably become romantically entangled. And I'm sure they'll cross paths in her professional life and his professional life. It just, that line itself seemed a bit premature for me.
And to me, I think that line pretty much sets up that she's going to be conflicted to actually help him at some point.
Oh, yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I love the part of the scene where she mentions his daughter and his family, and he like starts walking towards her and she doesn't move. Did you
Yeah.
notice that?
Yeah, that was the, yeah, because you saw him like get that like physical intimidating presence, and you're like, is he gonna slap her? What's gonna happen here? And then he backs off just at the last moment. That I thought was, yeah, really powerful.
Really great acting. They need more moments like that. I hope that that is there. The next scene shows Tyson cleaning the Lincoln Navigator, and his dad isn't happy with him working for Dwight. They both mention how far basically black people have come to be doing stuff like this. But Tyson mentions that he can learn a lot from a businessman, quote unquote, like Dwight. What were your thoughts on that, Dan?
I think my biggest takeaway was that seems like a slap in the face to his father, who also apparently runs his own business. And so to be like, wow, I have a lot to learn from this guy seems to imply, hey, I don't have the same respect for you, like learning it from you. So that was my big takeaway, I guess. How about you?
Yeah, similar. I mean, you weren't really like at first when he was like washing the car and the guy came out, I thought he was just like a random plumber that happened to come out of the house and like make a comment to him.
Oh,
But yeah, it was, I like how they introduced him. And I think, that'll be a great dynamic layer to add to the story. And then, Dan, we get introduced with another pretty damn pointless scene where this random mob guy, what'd you call him, Manny?
yeah.
He goes home and sees that there's poop in his yard and tells the guy, don't have your dog poop in my yard. That's the end of the scene. Dan, that is the whole scene.
Yeah, I kind of thought it was going to turn into something that we'd get later in the episode, kind of like the Godfather and like the horse's head chopped off, put in the bed. I thought we were going to be like, hey, here's a mafia guy's overreaction to poop in a yard. And now you're going to find like, oh, someone in your family's dead or something like that. I thought it was going to turn into a bigger moment than it was. The other part of me could see it going like, wow, look how much the mafia has changed that now everyone's just like a random Joe Schmo in the suburbs, like sitting out there talking to your neighbor, their dog's pooping on your lawn. So either I thought it was kind of contrasting older visions of what the mafia looks like, or that it's going to like escalate and be like, your dog did this to me. Now your dog is dead in
Oh,
pieces.
Dan, PETA is going to be all over this podcast.
I'm just saying it made sense. But you're right. If that's just in isolation, I don't know why that scene was in there.
Well, Dan, all I can say is that they better not do anything to that dog because it seemed like a German Shepherd. But if it is any other type of dog, like if it was like a small Yipper dog, yes, get rid of it. So the next scene shows Dwight, Tyson, and Bodie going to Jimmy's ranch. Dwight asks about the name Bodie, how he got it, but then Bodie says, hey, it's my handle. I'm actually Jewish. And then Dwight talks about him being named after the general Dwight D. Eisenhower. Different references. Was that Latin he was speaking at times? Anyways,
Well, or just
Italian.
Italian.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it could be Italian. And Bodie knew what he was talking about. So I think they were trying to show like at this time, they're kind of showing how Bodie and Dwight are pretty smart, like they aren't dumb people, like they know things.
Sure.
What did you think? You think it was a worthless? No, sorry, Dan. It's my wife. Hold on one second. I'm just kidding. I'm not married. Okay, Dan. Anyways, go on. What'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I didn't think of it being like the smart guys in the room because I also figured out what that meant. But
Oh,
I guess someone from your kind of stature thinking that it makes
oh
sense.
my gosh. Dan with his condescending calling me a dumb guy. Okay, Dan. All right.
Like
Um,
I said, I'm not the funny one on the podcast, so I got to be like a jerk personality or something.
I like it. Play the heel. I like it. So basically they go to the middle of nowhere. Dwight and Jimmy's guy, Badface, talk, and it seems stuff is going to blow up. They might get in a fight. I was looking forward to this. And then Jimmy comes out of the house to stop it. I've
Oh,
seen
hey,
this.
was this the same Jimmy? You said
No, and I wrote here,
no.
it's
Okay,
not Yellowstone Jimmy, unfortunately. I feel like I've recognized this guy from somewhere else, though, in like a marijuana type or drug deal type thing. The guy gets typecast in this stuff, I feel like. I don't know.
sure.
Have you seen him before
Have I seen that actor before?
in this type of role or any?
I'd have to look him up. I seem to recognize him, but I can't place him.
Okay. So Dwight and Jimmy go back and forth over price. It's a pretty good deal for Dwight and a fair deal for Jimmy. Jimmy then notifies Dwight that the preserves he's been eating are laced with THC. And Dwight seems pretty elated after thinking about it, saying, I was wondering why I was feeling so good. And then on their way home, Dwight is.
Wait. When he gave the delivery of that line, that was the first time I've laughed in the show. Because like you just saw his body kind of change again. And then like they had their whole high conversation on the way back. But that was the one time I've laughed so far. You were curious.
Great, Dan. We've probably done, I don't know, out of all the trailers and show, we're probably at like, I don't know, somewhere over 100 minutes. This is your first laugh. I'm glad we're counting those. They're so
Well,
rare, Dan.
but to be fair, I mean, this is still one of the pieces I struggle a little bit with the show is I don't get what emotion I'm supposed to feel most of the time as I watch this. If you do like one tiny gritty moment in the show per episode, and you do one lighthearted moment in the episode, and then you've got some like dialogue that connects stuff together. I just can't place where the show is trying to live. It's like, I mean, I guess Better Call Saul has some elements, but just different execution, I guess. I don't know. How do you feel? Because this is a good thing to bring up. Like early when we were talking on the preview episode, we're like, oh, wow, we watched one trailer and it seemed really dark. And that was my initial perception of what the show was going to be. And then we saw the behind the scenes and it's like, oh, this show has everything from love to comedy to betrayal to whatever. And I was like, wow, I don't know how to feel about that. So how do you feel about it so far? From an emotional, how you perceive it as a viewer of it.
It's a funny show. It's kind of out of sorts, but yeah, I think it's honestly based more in humor than anything, probably. I mean, it's not like a comedy, but
Yeah.
it is really interesting, that you're like asking the question, what feeling should I be feeling while watching this show? Because I've known you aren't human for a while, Dan. You're an alien. In fact, you're a lot like Elon Musk. Anyways, okay, going on into
Oh,
our next.
wow. Given the events of the past couple of weeks here, that's
I am
interesting.
kidding, just because he is very, very genius, and you're like, how does his brain work? But it's like, is he an alien? Like, he's so smart. You're
Well,
the
but I
same
mean,
way.
did you find yourself laughing out loud a lot? Because I mean, obviously, we have different personalities.
Yeah, or crying. Yeah.
Or crying. Okay.
Anyways, I'm kidding, just laughing. Yeah, I do. I did laugh. Probably 4 or 5 times. I don't actually laugh so little where I can count them, Dan. Like some people. Okay, so on their way home, Dwight is pretty high, very annoying. And this is where he talks about being Rip Van Winkle, seeing so many things different, price of coffee, goes on about the pronouns. I thought this was poor writing, very poor writing. Like they could have done so much more with it and make it like a meaningful scene rather than some just poor way of trying to bring about culture right now. What did you think, Dan?
Well, what I thought was interesting, you had referenced, I think, both the pronouns piece and Rip Van Winkle, I think, on our previews episode. And I hadn't seen that. So I didn't know anything about him being high at the time. You just conveyed that, like, oh, there's this scene where this happens.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, okay, well, if he said all this stuff and it's under the guise of he's just high right now, and he ended that saying, like, oh man, I just said all that stuff because I'm high, basically. I don't know why they wasted a scene on it, but I was like, okay, I don't know if it's supposed to really be commentary on anything aside from the fact that it's like slight perceptions, but overblown because he's high and he's just talking out loud.
Yeah, but even though you're high and you're talking, you probably still mean the stuff that you say, right?
I don't know.
Oh, Dan.
Remember,
Okay.
I'm the straight laced one. I have very little experience in that regard. I'm just
Yes, Dan, we
surmising.
need to get you those preserves. Oh, and it was interesting to me when he starts going on about playwright, author Arthur and Henry Miller and talks
So
about
is Arthur the death of a salesman? That's what I'm was thinking of.
I mean, it sounds familiar, but I thought he was a playwright.
Yeah,
Anyways, how
yeah,
he
it
has
is. It
sex
is.
with
Yeah, yeah, it
Marilyn
is a play.
Monroe.
It's Arthur Miller. I didn't know about the Marilyn Monroe bit though.
I didn't I didn't either. And my life isn't any better for knowing that. So thanks, Taylor Sheridan, for that
There you go.
pointless trivia. I actually felt that that was something that a writer would know. But guess what? Writer of the show, whoever that, I mean, I feel like I know his name. What is it? Guy from Sopranos. That was one thing that you know, but most people don't know, I feel like. So you wasted our time. So then it shows Manny, and he is looking for Dwight in Tulsa. He confirms that Dwight is staying at the Mayo, and then that was that scene. Very quick, like just finding out if he's there. Again, could have been combined with the dog scene. As far as I'm concerned, you're wasting scenes now. So then Dwight gets his debit card from the mail guy downstairs. He goes upstairs, punches in the information, and has immediately the contact information about his daughter. I mean, that was pretty immediate as far as the information he got. But he calls her, and her husband answers, and Dwight discovers that she's married. And he asks to speak with Tina, but Tina will not speak with him. He says, or the husband goes and asks Tina. Tina says, I'm not talking to him. I mean, it's kind of like the shock of like, this is her dad and everything that he's ever heard about him. Like, how can you expect she's going to take this call? But he did ask. And then Dwight asked if they have kids because he hears kids in the background. And he asks if he can hear Tina's voice. And
Mhm.
Tina comes on the phone. She basically says, here's my voice. Are you happy? And then click. You don't hear her anymore. So what'd you
Well,
think?
well, especially the click after him asking if he can see her is when she hangs up on
Oh,
him.
yeah, yeah. He did ask if she can. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like being a dad myself, it's crazy to imagine being in that kind of position where my like to not even know I have grandkids. That would just be really crazy to experience that. So, I mean, it makes total sense why so much of what he's focused on is trying to rekindle this kind of relationship. So, I mean, kudos to him for trying, and I think he's kind of led to that point too. Wasn't it the previous episode where someone was talking about his daughter? Can't remember if it was Stacy Beale or who it was, but I think he kind of led him to the realization like, I've got to try. I've got to try to be able to reach out to her, connect with her. I'm really curious about what's going to happen in future episodes because it's teeing up for them to reunite in some capacity. But I'm wondering what that moment is for Tina to go from like, no, I'm absolutely not talking to you to like, oh yeah, let's, bring this together. So is it going to be is it just a change of heart that happens after thinking about it? Is there going to be some external factor in her life? Is he going to force his way in? I guess it'll be interesting to see.
So I've got about 4 lines left in reviewing the show, and then I'd like to continue to talk about this particular scene. Um,
Sure.
Dwight is visibly upset. He then walks across Tulsa to the center of the universe where no one can hear him.
Which, okay, after seeing the first scene, I thought for sure that's coming back again. I knew it had to be some sort of here's my spot to talk. Did you get that vibe when you saw the first scene?
No, I was still disillusioned by the fact they lied about it in
I
my
don't think they
head.
lied about it. We
Right.
should go. We'll road trip down there before next season of this kicks off.
You guys, when we have, let's say, 10,000 subscribers, then Dan and I will make a trip down to Tulsa. Okay.
Nice.
We can probably have a Tulsa Kingdom conference or something, Tulsa Time conference. So he walks across to the center of the universe where no one can hear him, and he tells that secret, which is that he asked her to stop coming not because it was hard on her, but because it was so hard on him. And to see her, and it was so hard on him to see her, and he was sorry about that. And it's a very emotional part, and that was the end of the episode. So just like Taylor Sheridan, I'm glad that the emotional part is the ending of it. You know,
I thought that was one of the better intersections of writing and acting was
right.
that scene. Like you felt like it was set up well. The little monologue made sense. So that felt much deeper than, I think we referenced when he's first getting out of prison and, some of the monologues that he's had throughout the show. This felt real and something tangible.
It is interesting. We're on different sides of the spectrum, Dan. You're a dad. I am not. You know what it's like to want to see your kids and whatnot. I know what it's like to not want to see my parents. So I was kind of actually looking at it from her perspective and my brothers too, in the sense that my mom has tried to call my siblings and tried to get them to see her. And it
Hmm.
was always too great of an ask. And so I totally get that. And I think there's probably, that probably is spread across a lot of the listeners and watchers of the show is you're probably been on one side or the other, of that particular scene. But yeah, it was really interesting. Glad they showed it. I think they're looking forward. What I'm looking forward to most is the relationship between him and Stacy. I did say in our first episode, I want to see what's the love story because there has to be a love story, just like Beth and Rip in Yellowstone.
Mhm.
I want to see how the daughter thing goes and that dynamic, and I want to see if he gets in a clash with New York and it turns up New York versus Tulsa or whatever. So, what are your reflections, Dan, and what would you like to see coming up? What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, well, I'll take kind of the opposite angle here. I want to see how the infrastructure of the business is built out. 'Cause I would think,
You
well,
would. Yes, okay.
I'm just saying, like, okay, first episode, here's this like decently like small to mid-sized pot operation. And I think we already saw now the connection with Jimmy. I bet that will probably grow into a greater distribution play. But that part aside, there's not he didn't take over another business. His cash flow is really low. He's and I reviewed that one scene that we were kind of debating about last week, but he's expected to kick up 5K a week. So that's 250K a year.
Yep.
He's got to pay to his bosses. Well, now whether he does this amount or not, it's 100K that's requested for the grievance against Vince. So that's 350K. And then you've got all these other expenses. You've got Tyson, he's paying 2K a week too. You bought a 50K Escalade. So I should probably sit here with a spreadsheet and, track finances for this enterprise going on. But I'm just kind of curious, like he's got to make the numbers work and he's got to start growing this pretty quickly. So it'll be interesting to see. Probably the growth of the business is what drives some of the conflicts and potential issues with other mafia families and things like that going on. But right now, it seems like he's off to an awfully slow start. So I'm kind of looking forward to see how that expands and grows over the next couple episodes.
Well, I'm sure that you could probably figure out somewhat close to what his marijuana business makes. I mean, after you figure everything out, I'm sure you could.
Well, Bodie even said it. He said something like, "Oh, we've made like 5K today," and
Wow.
so but that's going to be your revenue he's talking about, not his profit. And so if he takes 20%, well, I mean, you've got to pay for product. I can't imagine.
But we know how much the product costs now, right?
Well, yeah, we should set up a spreadsheet.
We
can
should.
track.
Be
Does
really
this make
interesting.
financially sense? And I'm also really curious about how he knows how much he can bribe people for without them either being offended or taking advantage or going to the cops or whatever. It's like he just slips someone a bill and they're like, okay, great, I'll do whatever you want. I mean, doesn't it tempt you a little bit when you go to the DMV to be like, man, can I just slip them a little more and they make this a less painful process for me?
I mean, we're kind of at different ends of the income spectrum, so I would probably offer them something other than money. Like,
You would invite them back to the center of the universe.
yes, I would. And I would tell them a secret, but they wouldn't hear me because they would be outside the center of the universe. Well, we've reached the end of our episode 2 review. Anything else you want to touch on before we end up?
No, I think we've got, I thought we'd uncover a little bit more about these relationships. And I think that's exactly what it was a little bit more. We find out about the daughter and that there's grandkids in the picture and there's that phone call. We see Manny in a couple scenes in here, but we still don't really know a lot about him. So I think it's just kind of setting us up down the same trajectory we were from before, but getting a little bit deeper in each of those areas for the upcoming episode.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, we're judging by the direction where we are in our second show, and I think there might be 10 episodes possibly.
Yeah. 10.
I think that we're going to be at the point at the end of the season where we're expecting another season, judging by how Taylor Sheridan structures the shows. Even if he's not writing them, I do have that feeling. So hopefully we get that second season, but keep on the Reddit, find out what Reddit is saying. Dan, let us know. And yes, if you're wondering, did you meet a sick person today? Well, you didn't meet them, but you related to them because Dan is one of those sick people that gets excited by spreadsheets. Excited. And there's just something wrong with it. I don't know what it is, but they like, oh, we can make a spreadsheet. Like, what is wrong with you, Dan?
For more on this, join us next time.
Join us next time on Tulsa Time.